Hi, I'm Mark, this is Mark's Tech Vlogs on YouTube, and today I want to talk about which UK compatible smart lock is best in 2024. Now back in October I made a video going through some of the best smart locks for UK multi-point doors. And whilst that video was only 10 months ago, a lot has actually changed in the smart lock world. And at the time of recording it is August 2024, and so I thought it was time to make a bit of a refresher. And for those in the UK, especially those with UK lift-to-lock multi-point doors, there are a variety of smart locks that are available for you. In this video, however, I'm going to focus on three. I'm going to focus on the 4th generation Nuki locks, the Aqara U200 and the Switchbot Lock Pro. And none of these were even available when I recorded that video back in October. First, so before I dive into what is going to be a pretty long video, I want to talk about the locks I'm not including. Firstly, I'm not including the 𝐤𝐤𝐞 L1 or L2, and this is for a few reasons. Firstly, I've never used it and so I don't really have an opinion on it. Secondly, I've not really found anyone who thinks it's a great lock. And thirdly, 𝐤𝐤 don't seem to be very good at keeping these things updated. And all of that means it's not a lock I can recommend. Secondly, I'm also not going to talk about the SimBoard smart lock. And really that's because whilst this is a good lock, it does take a while to install. It's also not HomeKit compatible, which is what I wanted to focus on this video as well. If you do want to check out the SimBoard smart lock, I have got a review and I'll link that below. And then thirdly, I'm not going to include the locked touch. And that's simply because whilst I really liked this lock, unfortunately the company have now gone bankrupt. Now there are a few others out there that will work on UK doors, but I wanted to focus on ones that I'd actually used in this video and also ones that were Apple HomeKit compatible. So let's get into the comparison and kick off by talking about price. Now the simplest when it comes to price is the Aqara U200, and this is going to cost you a maximum of £270 if there's not an offer on Amazon. This includes a keypad and fingerprint scanner with it, which can also scan NFC cards and Apple HomeKey. Now there is an optional Aqara M3 hub which costs £120, but 99% of people do not need this hub. Next is the Switchbot Lock Pro, and this is the cheapest of all the locks I'm talking about. And this comes in £119 for the lock on its own. However, if you do want to get it into Apple Home, Google or Amazon, or even something like Samsung SmartThings, you are going to need the optional Hub Mini with Matter support as well. If you buy the lock and the hub as a package, that comes to £136. And then finally, if you did want a keypad with a fingerprint scanner and NFC card reader as well, then you can want a packet that includes all three of those, and that comes in at £190. Even if you go for everything in the pack, so the lock, the keypad and the hub, it's only going to cost you £190, making Switchbot the cheapest one here. And then finally, the Nuki will set you back £160 for the base model or £250 for the Pro model of the 4th generation. If you want a keypad with fingerprint scanner for the Nuki, that's going to cost you £145 more. The other thing to note, the base model of the Nuki 4th generation is that if you don't want to use it with the Nuki Bridge, which is another kind of £80, and you want to use Matter over Thread, you are going to have to make a £40 in-app purchase to enable that. And for me, that £45 extra for the Nuki base model that you're going to need to enable Matter over Thread means that most people are better off going for the Pro. That's because you don't need to enable that and it's got Wi-Fi built in. On top of that, you also get a rechargeable battery pack in the box. The only other thing to keep in mind for all of these is that you need to make sure your front door has got a compatible cylinder. And I'll talk more about compatibility as we go through, but for UK users with kind of the Euro cylinders, what you need to bear in mind is that your cylinder must be able to be unlocked from the outside using a key if there is already a key on the inside. Now if your cylinder doesn't do that, you are going to need to pick up an extra cylinder. Nuki do one themselves that costs about £80, but the most affordable way to do it is to get a 𝐤𝐤 thumb turn lock. These will cost you about £20. That's what I did for my back door. So let's talk about compatibility. So all three of these work with Euro cylinders and Swiss cylinders. And again, all three work with multi-point doors where you have to lift the handle in order to engage those multi-points. It's worth saying that with all three, you are still going to need to lift your handle in order to engage those multi-points before you can lock the door. All three also work with thumb turn locks, although you're going to want to make sure you've got a compatible thumb turn lock because below the thumb turns is a different shaped thing on most different brands. 𝐤𝐤 seems to be the safest bet. Now with the Nuki, you will need to order a free thumb turn adapter from their website. You can also get these for a couple pounds on Amazon if you need them quickly. Both the Switchbot and the Aqara U200 come with a variety of thumb turn adapters in the box. Now for compatibility with other locks, it's worth saying that the Aqara is compatible with American deadbolts. The Switchbot and Nuki are compatible with UK oval cylinders. All three of these also support a kind of latch mode. What that basically means is if your door needs an extra key turn from the outside to get in, even when the door is actually unlocked, then they can work with that. That's what my front door has. What this means for UK users with multi-point doors is that all three will cover most situations. There's some little extras there for USA customers with the Aqara, and the Switchbot is probably the most compatible all round. So let's move on from compatibility and dive deeper into specification. So all three support Matter and communicate via Bluetooth. The Aqara U200 and the Nuki support Matter over Thread. The Switchbot is just Matter over Wi-Fi thanks to their Hub Mini. The only one to actually support Wi-Fi is the Nuki 4th Generation Pro. However, you do basically achieve the same thing with the Switchbot thanks to that Hub Mini with Matter support. When it comes to third-party services, all of them work with Apple HomeKit, Google Home, Samsung SmartThings and Amazon Alexa. The Aqara also works with IFTTT. The Aqara is also the only one of these to support Apple HomeKey. Now all three send data securely, and because they work with the existing cylinder on your door and have nothing new on the outside, they're basically as secure as your existing door. In fact, the only one of these that gives away that you've got a smart lock out of the box is the Aqara U200 because of that keypad on the outside. When it comes to battery life, all three are very similar with some slight differences. The Nuki has a 6-month battery life, and that applies whether you use a rechargeable pack or 4 AA batteries. The Switchbot has the longest battery life with 4 AA batteries coming in at 270 days. Switchbot also sell a dual battery pack. This allows you to take part of the battery pack out in order to charge it, while the other part continually powers your lock. This means with something like this and the Switchbot, you'll never actually find that your lock is offline. Much like the Nuki, Aqara also come in at 6 months battery life. And the Aqara actually has a rechargeable battery that comes with the device. One of the really cool things is removing the faceplate reveals a USB-C cable, which means you can charge that battery directly without having to remove it from the lock. Aqara even give you a little bag to put something like a power bank in whilst you charge it, and you can hook that bag over your door handle. This is a nice little extra and means your lock will never be offline. All in all, this does give the Switchbot the edge when it comes to battery life, but actually there's not a huge amount in it. In fact, the only one to be offline when you charge a battery is the Nuki. When it comes to out-of-home access, all three offer this when you use it with a Matter-compatible hub. For me, that's my HomePod Mini. This out-of-home access, however, is in your native Home app. So for me, that's the Apple Home app. If you're thinking about out-of-home access in the Lock's native app, then there's different ways for different locks. If you want that for the Nuki and you've got the 4th generation, you'll need to buy that Matter over Thread update. If you bought the Nuki Pro, it will work in the Nuki app out of the box. This is thanks to the Wi-Fi. For the Switchbot Lock Pro, if you pick up the Hub Mini with Matter support, which realistically you're going to need anyway, then this gives you out-of-home access in the Switchbot app as well, out of the box. For the Aqara, if you want out-of-home access via the Aqara app, then you're going to need to buy that M3 hub, costing £120. However, other than showing you the lock status in the Aqara app when you could also access it in the Home app anyway, there's not a lot of point to this because all of the settings you can adjust in the Aqara app, you generally need to activate the keypad to do so. That means you need to be in Bluetooth range and close enough to the keyboard to press it. When it comes to other ways to open your door, all three still support using a key from the outside. All three also offer some guest access options, with Nuki and Aqara probably being the best. If you use the keypads with these, then all of them can support key codes and fingerprints. The Switchbot and Aqara can also support NFC tags, and then the Aqara can support Apple HomeKey. Then you can control them with their native apps when you're connected via Bluetooth. As I said just now, there are also times when you use their native apps when you're away from home. But thanks to Matter, you can access your lock when you're away from home using your Home app of choice. So for me, that's Apple Home. And then finally we should talk about geolocation, because the only one to support this out of the box is the Nuki. This is, however, something that both Aqara and Switchbot are currently working on. And it's also worth noting that you can achieve this for all three via the Apple Home app. All in all, when it comes to spec, they're actually pretty similar. However, for Apple users, I think the Aqara has a slight edge thanks to that Apple HomeKey support. So let's talk about fitting and setting up. And the fitting process for all three is very similar. And I'm going to talk about fitting from a perspective of a UK user using a Euro cylinder. That's because that's what I've got, but also that's pretty common in the UK, especially for most modern front doors. Now for my door, because my lock didn't protrude more than 3mm from the actual door handle, I needed to use a stick-on method for all three of these locks. Now all three come with a stick-on or a screw-on mount, and generally for stick-on ones you use included 3M tape. It's worth saying that for the Nuki, I actually had the Nuki handle from when I had the Nuki 3. That's basically a bespoke handle designed to replace your existing one, ready to mount a Nuki onto. And this is probably a good time to talk briefly about the Nuki. And if you don't know, the Nuki is a pack that comes with a bespoke handle, a 5-star cylinder, and a Nuki lock. Now, if you get the Nuki, you'll get the Nuki Lock 3. If you get the Nuki Plus, you'll get the Nuki Lock 4 Pro. And my guess is that this discrepancy between which version of the Nuki you get in the packs is probably just down to shifting stock at the moment. But I do think it's really confusing. And realistically, having installed a Nuki with my normal handle, but also with the Nuki handle, I'd say there's not a big difference. And that means unless you want a really seamless installation, I'd probably just go with the Nuki pack out the box and I wouldn't bother with the Nuki. But let's continue with installation. So once you've got your sticky pad mount installed, it's time to add the lock. Now the Switchbot and the Aqara both screw on. The Nuki just clips on. Both fit to their mount pretty securely. And the other thing you might need to do is if you've got a thumb turn, before you stick the lock on, you're going to need to put the right thumb turn adapter on. From there, you're going to want to download and open their respective apps and register an account if you don't already have one. At this point, you'll then pair the lock. And all three of these kind of set up locks in a very similar way and involves all the usual stuff like giving it a name and assigning it to a room. There's also a calibration for all three, which will turn the lock automatically and sense where the breakpoints are. This means it knows how much it needs to turn when it locks and unlocks. It's also where you'll trigger a latch mode if you do need that activating. And at that point, you can add it to your Matter app of choice as well. So for me, that's Apple Home. And really, having installed all three of these, I think you could install any of these and get it all set up and paired in the app in less than 15 minutes. The only thing I'd add is at the time of recording this video, the Aqara does take slightly longer because it doesn't seem to like pairing to Apple Home very well. That means it took me quite a few attempts to do that, and I tried things like taking the battery out, turning my phone on and off again, and also restarting my Wi-Fi network. Messing around with all of this did get the Aqara U200 into my Apple Home app, and now it works fine. Alongside adding the Aqara U200 into your Apple Home app, it will ask you if you wanted to set up Apple HomeKey at the same time. If you say yes, it won't just add it to your phone, but it will add it to all your Apple devices that are compatible with HomeKey and anyone else in your Apple Home. This is a really seamless way of doing it. This means all three are pretty similar to install and set up, with the Aqara taking slightly longer due to what I think is a bit of a firmware bug. I'm sure this is something that will get fixed soon, and I'll let you know if I hear anything else about it. Likewise, if you're installing the Aqara and you have any issues, do stick them below and I'll try and help you out. And now we've talked about installing these, this is a good time to talk about the design of all three. So the Nuki comes in a choice of white if you go for a base model, or white or black if you go for the Pro model. In my opinion, this design is nice with kind of rounded edges and a nice round twist knob with a button in the middle and an indicator light around the outside. The Nuki is also the lightest because it has a plastic body. Having used different Nukis for about a year and a half, this doesn't make them any less durable in my opinion. The Switchbot Lock Pro only comes in black and is certainly the largest of the three. It's made of metal as well, which makes it quite heavy. The battery compartment is magnetic and it has a large knob with a push button on the centre. It also has a magnetic sensor you can place on your door frame, which tells you if your door is left ajar. And then finally, the Aqara comes in a choice of silver or black and has this kind of super rounded design. That means whilst it is the tallest of these smart locks, that design doesn't mean that you notice it. It also sticks out about the same from your door as the Nuki. And then it just has that simple turn knob on and no button. And really, which has the best design is going to be down to your own opinion. It's also going to depend on what you're placing it against and the colour of your door. And personally, I don't think one looks better than the other. And I think realistically, whichever one you put on your door, you're going to get used to seeing every day. So let's move on to the most important bit of this video and talk about using them. So all three have a twist knob on the inside that you can use to easily and manually lock or unlock your door. Now both the Switchbot and the Nuki also have a push button. Nuki even supports a double tap function and some extra features like double tap to kind of lock and go. You can also switch off those buttons in their apps if you want to. Personally, from the inside for all three of these locks, that twist is the easiest way to lock and unlock your door if you're actually by the door waiting to go out. But of course, you can still use your app of choice. From the outside, you can use a key with all three if you want to, which is great for less tech-savvy family members, or maybe people like cat sitters you just give a spare key to. If you've got a keypad, you can also use a key code or a fingerprint. Then you can use their native apps, but also your Matter app of choice. Now the Nuki is the only one to support geolocation. This means it supports a feature where it will auto-lock when you go and auto unlock when you get home. This generally responds within a few seconds, and from using it tends to rely on a Bluetooth connection being picked up. For Nuki, the auto unlock via geolocation was my favourite way to use it. I also found it pretty reliable. For locking, if you've got one of the keypads, the quick lock button is the easiest way to lock as you go. But you can also set up a when the last person leaves geolocation lock feature in the Apple Home app. And this is a good time to talk about how automations work in the Apple Home app. And this is because the Apple Home app has some really nice when the first person arrives, when the last person leaves automations. However, if you add a security device into one of these automations, for example, when the last person leaves, lock the door, you'll actually get a prompt to run this. This is because the lock is a security device. There is, however, a way around it, so you don't have to manually trigger that to run. And this can be done in one of two ways. This can be done using a smart plug or done using a kind of fake switch you can set up in something like Homebridge with a Raspberry Pi. Whichever you use, the setup process in the app is the same. And basically what you want to do is instead of having your lock in the when the last person leaves automation, you want to have your fake switch or your smart plug. And when the last person leaves, you want to turn it off. You then want to set up a separate automation based on the behaviour of an accessory. So you'd say, when that smart plug turns off, lock the door. This will give you a when the last person leaves automatic locking of your door. The other thing you'll want to set up is to make sure that when a door unlocks, it then turns that plug back on. This means it's on, ready to turn off when the last person leaves again. And this is a way to automatically get geolocation via the Apple Home app. Any questions about that, stick it below and I'll explain it a bit more. For the Switchbot, my favourite way to unlock it is using a fingerprint because that's really responsive, and for the Aqara I just love Apple HomeKey because I can just wave my Apple Watch right near the keypad and it unlocks straight away. The same applies for your phone. When it comes to the speed of unlocking, when you trigger it via a fingerprint or a HomeKey or something like that, I found that the Aqara is the fastest, and it kicks in almost instantly. And it doesn't matter how you trigger it, it's just really fast. Now don't get me wrong, the others aren't slow, but there is a noticeable difference. The other thing people ask a lot with smart locks is how loud they are, and the Aqara and Nuki are pretty much the same volume. The Switchbot is very slightly quieter. The Aqara, however, does offer a quiet mode, and this basically means it'll turn the lock slower in order to reduce the noise. This means it does take longer to unlock, but it is quieter in the process. You can even set up a routine for this in the Aqara app, where you can say between certain times it goes into quiet mode. Likewise, if you didn't want to do that, you can press the confirm button on the keypad before unlocking it with something like HomeKey and it will unlock quietly. This is a nice and pretty unique feature to have from Aqara. Personally, which is best for accessing it kind of depends on what technology you use. For me, I'd say it's the Aqara because of Apple HomeKey and how quickly it responds. And actually activating HomeKey via the keypad is quicker than using geolocation with the Nuki in my opinion. It's also worth mentioning how the latch function works if you're going to need that. And as I said earlier, that's when your door can be unlocked but still need a key turn from the outside for you to get in. And Nuki and Switchbot basically get around this by having 3 modes. So there's a lock, there's an unlock, and there's an open. Now Apple Home doesn't support 3 modes, it just supports locked and unlocked, so you will have to trigger this mode in their respective apps. This third kind of open feature is something coming with Matter 1.2, but we don't know when that's coming to Apple Home. Now Aqara does also offer this drop latch feature in their app, but they also have a slightly smarter way of doing it with the keypad. And that's basically because if you're using a keypad with something like Apple HomeKey or a fingerprint, the assumption is you're trying to get in. That means if the door is unlocked, it will just drop the latch. And personally, I think this gives Aqara the edge. And that's because if you just put the rubbish out, it's really easy just to wave your wrist by it rather than having to reach for an app. All 3 will hold that latch down for a certain amount of time and you can change this time in the app. After that time's passed, it will just release it again. And then we should talk about guest access. And the Nuki lets you create guest access within their app. And this includes things like choosing which days someone can access and which times and when the access expires. You can even remove the access remotely, which is great. The thing to note is that unless you buy the Nuki keypad, that access needs to be via the Nuki app, so whoever you're giving access to needs to download the app onto their phone. Now the Switchbot doesn't support anything via the app for other people with the Switchbot app other than sharing your entire home, but it does support guest key codes and fingerprints and NFC cards. However, these are only set to be enabled between particular dates, for example between now and a week's time. That means if you did have someone like a cleaner who needed access every Monday between 12 and 1, you couldn't achieve that with the Switchbot. This means the Switchbot is probably geared up really well for people like Airbnb hosts, but not for occasional visitors to your house. And then the Aqara also supports time-limited guest access. And again, that's on days between certain times on those days and can have expiry dates. The thing to note, however, is that in order to set these up, you need to activate the keypad. That means even if you had that M3 hub, this is absolutely useless for Airbnb hosts unless you're going to your place every time you need to set up a new code. This is, however, great for homeowners who need to give regular access to people like cat sitters and cleaners. And so for guest access, it kind of depends what you want. If you're an Airbnb host who doesn't live near your apartment, then the Aqara is no good for you, but the Switchbot's great. The Nuki would also be great, but you will need to buy that external keypad. However, if you just need to give people occasional access limited by day or time, then you're going to want to use the Aqara or the Nuki. So coming up to the end of this video, 3 fantastic smart locks, but which is best? And the great thing about the 3 I've talked about in this video is that all 3 are absolutely fantastic, reliable smart locks. They're also really compatible. And if I'm honest, I don't think you'd be disappointed if you picked up any of them. And so probably the best way to end this video is to talk about which I use and why. So actually I used the Nuki 3 for about a year and then switched to the Nuki 4 Pro. And generally I unlocked using the geolocation feature and then I locked it with an automation in the Apple Home app. And while I was using it, it was a great lock and it was really reliable. I have, however, now switched to the Aqara U200 and I've been using that for about a month and a half. And I still auto-lock via Apple HomeKey, although quite often use the lock thing on the keypad as well. But I unlock with Apple HomeKey, which is just so simple and so quick. And the U200 is my personal favourite of the 3 just because of how quick it responds and that it has Apple HomeKey. And as an Apple Watch user, that's especially useful because I can literally just raise my wrist. And then I also use the Switchbot Lock Pro on my back door. And I've got their keypad on the other side. And I've pretty much kept this there since I did the review for it because it does have that contact sensor that tells you if you've left the door open. And this is a really useful feature to have on my back door. And this lock is great and it's equally responsive and reliable, although not quite as quick as the Aqara. And don't get me wrong in all of this, the Nuki is still a really good smart lock. And it's compatible with a lot of the things you want a smart lock to be compatible with, and there's some really nice features in the app as well. However, a lot of its features are comparable to the much cheaper Switchbot. And when it basically comes in the same price as the Aqara and doesn't have Apple HomeKey or a keypad out of the box, I am beginning to wonder if Nuki are falling a little bit behind. What I'm actually hoping is that the Aqara U200 is going to pave the way for all sorts of new exciting smart locks that are HomeKey compatible, and I can't wait to see what other companies do next. If you guys are thinking about picking up any of these three and you've got any questions, do stick them below. There are purchase links below to all three as well. They will take you to the product on Amazon in whichever country you're in. Now those are affiliate links, so if you use one of those links, thank you very much, because that helps this channel out. It helps me keep making videos for you guys because this isn't my full-time job. If you want to watch individual reviews for each of the locks, they are also on this channel. Subscribe if you want to see more videos, give this video a like if you found it helpful, and I'll see you guys again soon.